Alright, so what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is, if you remember last class period, what we worked on was multiplying binomials, right? We took a binomial times another binomial, we multiplied, and we had a lot of different techniques. Foiling and distributive property. We showed you how to multiply binomial times a binomial. And more often than not, what happened was we produced trinomials, which we were given three terms, because two terms we were able to combine because they had like terms, right? And we were produce for only three terms left. So the one thing I want you to understand is, usually when we multiplied our binomials, right? Remember, we multiplied the first times the first and the last times the last. Well, that first times the first always produced us this square term, at least what in the examples we looked at. That always produced us that first term. And the last times the last, and how they were written, always produced us this last term. It was only when we multiplied the inside and the outside where we were able to get the same term, combine them to get a 10a. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of work backwards. Rather than giving you two binomials and say, hey, multiply it out and give me the answer, now what I'm going to do is say, hey, here's a trinomial. Tell me what the two binomials are. What is it that multiplies to give you there? So here's a little trick. We know that our first two numbers have to multiply to give us that first term. So I told you guys, we worked on this earlier. What you're going to do is you're going to create something. You're going to create C, a little x with a C and a B. So you just write this down. For the C, you put a dot, and for the B, you put a plus. And what that does, that's just a mental reminder for telling you what operation to do. The next thing you need to remember is what is your A, B, and your C? Well, on our previous notes, we talked about quadratic form, where quadratic form is B is going to be your number, the number that's in front of your linear term, or the variable that has an exponent of 1, and C is going to be just your number that's all by itself, or it is not multiplied by a variable. So in this example, if I look at it, what number is all by itself? Doesn't have a multiplied by a term.
24.
24. Positive 24. Let's be careful with our things. And then B is going to be the number that's in front of our linear term, which would be 10. Okay? So now what we do with our little thing here, our little diagram I use, I need to think of what two numbers multiply to give me 24 and then add to give me 10. So to do this, a lot of you guys start thinking in your head and you're caught up on your multiplication. You're like, you totally forget it. So a couple things you guys can do is just kind of work on looking at, the factors. So automatically the first factor you should always think of is 24 and 1. 24 times 1 gives you 24. Now, here's one thing I'm going to tell you also as well, because you guys are going to get to problems that are going to start having negative numbers. Does negative 24 times negative 1 also produce you a positive 24? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Right? But if you were to add these together, would that give you a positive number? Does a negative plus a negative give you ever a positive? No. So we're not going to be worried about negative factors. Since my middle and my last term both are positive, I'm only going to worry about the positive factors. So I have 24 and 1. 24 plus 1 does not give me 10. Now I work on the next one. Dos. So 12 times 2, that gives me 24. Does that add up to give me 10? No. Gives me 14, right? So then we work on, now you could, no, we'll talk about that later. Then we can go 6 times, actually let's do it in order, right? 8 times 3 also gives me 24. But 8 plus 3, does that give me 10? No. 6 times 4? That multiplies you to 24. Does that give me 10? Yes. Yep. So you can say it's a positive 6 times a positive 4. So therefore, what I've noticed, ladies and gentlemen, is if I was going to now write it as two binomials, I know that these two numbers, a times a gives you a squared. And then what two numbers multiply to give you 24? Well, it's going to be a positive 6 and a positive 4. And that's how you're going to write your answers. Okay?